Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ask the CEO with Avrohom. Today, I'd like to introduce a very special guest. He's the global coordinator for the Charter of Trust with Siemens. We're together with his team in the Central Technology Department. He is driving the Siemens Cybersecurity Strategy, initiatives, and innovation. Previously, he was head of security business strategies for Siemens, as well as a project manager in Siemens Management Consulting in Germany and India. He is at the front lines of the digital transformation battlefield. It is my pleasure to welcome the one and only Kai Hermsen. Welcome, Kai.
Thank you very much, Avrohom. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure having you. So, Kai, it's very appropriately named the digital transformation battlefield because in your presentation on Charter of Trust, you talk about opportunities and risks associated with digital transformation. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, first of all, there's one thing that I need to point out. What we're trying to do with the Charter of Trust is actually to also term a little bit of a positive language on cybersecurity. So I probably rarely would call it a battlefield because that's, for me, that's too, that's military jargon, which we fall in often in cybersecurity. But the way we would want to see cybersecurity is as an opportunity in itself. Because if you get cybersecurity right, there's a whole world opening up called digitalization. So all the opportunities that you get when doing cybersecurity right is something that we want to emphasize with that Charter of Trust. But going back to your initial question, so digitalization does bring opportunities and risks. There's a lot of business models that are opening up through using data, through analyzing it, through making use of new forms of connectivity, Internet of Things. So that's very positive, and that's definitely something that Siemens as a company is driving, mainly, of course, in our B2B markets. So with a lot of customers, we're really driving application of digital use cases to make all our lives easier. On the flip side, actually, the other side of that coin of digitalization would be cybersecurity. We see that, and it's common truth, that through more connectivity, of course, there's more potential threat vectors that are opening up, because these connections can also be misused if not protected right. So we do see that there's an increase in risk because of the just sheer increase in the number of connections. Plus, we also see more professionalization on the side of the attackers, right? So cyber attacks have gotten more sophisticated over the last years. And that's something that we witnessed as Siemens as a company over the last years. And of course, being a company that takes pride in delivering high quality and trustworthy products, we do look into cybersecurity and do see it as also our obligation to think about cybersecurity as much as we think about digitalization and try to find answers for cybersecurity so that we can actually leverage the potential of digitalization. That's our fundamental conviction.
And you know what? I really believe that as well, because you can't just put your head in the sand and say, well, all these new products being put out there in the market connected to the internet, that puts us at risk, so take them out. We need to acknowledge that there are opportunities as well that we should be looking at, and we need to address those risks accordingly.
Absolutely, and take it with a positive stance also. To be honest, everything. Being in business is always considering risks. It's actually fundamentally, running a business is risk management. You need to know your risks. You need to find strategies and measures how to treat them. There's also some risks that you might want to accept, but at least you should be aware of them. That's the starting point, and then that's management. Which risks do I have to manage? Where do I have to find measures? And where doesn't it pay off anymore? Which risks am I willing to accept? That balance is the key to good management in business. And I think it also applies in one way or another to cybersecurity. It's about managing the risk.
So true. So what is the Charter of Trust?
So the Charter of Trust is an initiative that we created with 16 other partners at the beginning of last year. It's an initiative that, well, as the name hints at, is trying to establish trust in a digital world. The very background of this charter is the notion about which we talked at the beginning of this conversation, that digitalization brings opportunities and it brings risks. Digitalization and cybersecurity are two sides of the same coin. Well, noting that and seeing that there is probably a new quality and a new quantity in cyber attacks witnessed over the last, let's say, 2 to 3 years, we came together and said, look, if this is changing, if cybersecurity, the nature of cybersecurity or the nature of cyber attacks is changing, we might want to think about new ways of how to tackle cybersecurity and how to look at it. And with that notion, we came together and said, then we need to cooperate. We need to find other strong partners with which we can exchange on cybersecurity, because the topic is just transcending organizational boundaries. It's transcending geographic boundaries. And we need to jointly find solutions, because the topic is just bigger than any one single company. And that's kind of the fundamental belief of why we got together as a group of partners. And now, over the last year, we've established a platform for exchange based on 10 principles that we had defined at the very beginning of us coming together. So there's 10 principles in the Charter of Trust, kind of we're trying to give a little bit of a holistic view on how to look at the topic of cybersecurity that is ingrained in the 10 principles. And now what we're doing with the Charter of Trust is, now we're tackling these principles one by one in joint task forces, in joint discussions, defining ways on how to implement these principles. Because, for example, principle number 2 says, create trust in the digital supply chain. I mean, that's easier said than done, because we all know how complex supply chains these days actually are. They actually have evolved from being chains, linear change, into something like networks, right? And in digitalization or digital times, that will only, the number of dots, connections will only increase. So we need to find ways on how to build or interweave cybersecurity in this kind of a network. So we came together with these 16 partners, and we jointly defined, for example, for the supply chain, 17 baseline requirements, of which we believe any one company should implement, so that they can lift the baseline of cybersecurity in their supply chain, ultimately, of course, also lifting the baseline of cybersecurity that they will then build into their product, solution, and services that they will sell to their customers. And not only is that, I think, more effective to do it together with other partners, because only when 16 partners are starting this jointly, there can be kind of a movement. It's hard to start a movement if you're on your own. That's one thing.
You need to share ideas and share best practices.
Absolutely. And the good thing is, now with 16 global companies, we do have a test ground in our backyard, so to say. So we don't only recommend, but we also apply. So the basic conviction of the Charter of Trust is, let's not only exchange, but let's live by example. Because we are big companies, from Daimler to Airbus to Cisco to Dell to Siemens and others, that can apply these baseline requirements already in their own supply chain and in their own products and solutions. And that's what we're now starting. Of course, it will take some time. This change isn't, done easily. But we do see, we're very positive that we can actually implement, and that we're stronger together, and that we might be even faster together. Because there's, some of the partners that we have on the chart of trust are already our suppliers or our customers, So when we discuss this jointly from the very beginning, it's just much more meaningful.
Now, will the Charter of Trust be like a certification authority where you can get the stamp of approval for businesses?
Well, Avrohom, that's a question that we're being asked very often, to be honest. Well, to be frankly honest, that is something that we think about as an idea. So there's many ideas that came up now that we've gotten together and worked together, and I take it as a positive sign that we are actually thinking about, I would call, opportunities like that. Because when we started off in February of last year, we didn't even know if it makes sense to get together and think about cybersecurity together. We just had the feeling that it would make sense. Now, over the last year, I think, for example, with these baseline requirements, we have proof that it does make sense to sit together and work together. And we found out that as big companies, honestly, we face a lot of similar challenges on cybersecurity. And it is just very positive to have that notion, we're not alone. It's not just us thinking along these lines as Siemens, but there's also other big companies that are all very professionally managed and that are, world-class in what they're doing. And they see certain challenges that we see the same way. So that's the starting point. Now, coming back to your question, we don't have any concrete plans like that, but we are open. I always say the chart of trust is a platform for opportunity. There's a lot of ways one could go into with a platform like that. Let's see, but that's not at this point in time, it's not the goal. At this point in time, it's really getting together and jointly discuss objectives along the objectives of, yes, making the digital world a little bit more secure. And the way to do so at this point in time is by, leading by example. So not yet a certificate in that sense, but we have a lot of ideas, and it's more important for us to actually come up with the ideas of what to do first, and then we will think about how to do it. As a second.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, it is a grassroots movement. And
in a way, yes.
We're just at the beginning right now.
Absolutely, and at the same time, look, we feel a lot of, I would even say pressure, because the world isn't waiting for us, to find solutions for cybersecurity. It surely isn't. The pace at which digitalization is taking shape is just tremendous, and all of the companies on the chart of trust are helping to shape that, right? They're very active in digitalization because it's a clear business logic to be part of digitalization and help shape it. Now, we want to help establish the same with cybersecurity. We also need to, I think we all need to acknowledge that it can be an opportunity if you get cybersecurity right. That's the license to play in the field of digitalization. If we get that understanding across the industry, I think we've achieved a lot.
Now, let's just bring it home to a manufacturer, somebody that manufactures smart cameras, for example. What would they be looking at in order to conform to the Charter of Trust?
Well, in any manufacturer in that sense, or anybody producing product, solution, services, I think can find something in Charter of Trust and in the principles we've defined. I mean, the interesting part is it doesn't start with the product; it starts with the organization that is behind that product, right? So, and what we as Charter of Trust members say, and that's principle number one: if you don't have ownership for cybersecurity, you can take a whole lot of technical measures, but ultimately it will be hard to be secure. You need to have the right level of ownership, and that's the very reason why the Charter of Trust is also a CEO activity. It's the CEO signed the Charter of Trust, and said, look, this is of importance to us. It's of strategic importance to us as a company to think about cybersecurity. So I, as the executive, as the chief executive, have to acknowledge this is a question that is of importance to the entire company. That's where it starts. Of course, a lot of discussions are on expert level, but we wanted to form an initiative that is driven by the experts, but has sponsorship from the CEOs. And that's also, I think, how any one company should look at cybersecurity. Ultimately, cybersecurity should be of strategic importance to you. So you need to give it the right priority, and then establish, of course, an organization, the people, the processes, and the technologies behind, which then hopefully end up in a product that you just sketched being more secure by weaving cybersecurity into the development process from the very beginning. Right? Cybersecurity is not one of the things that you can bake into a product once it's already out there in the market.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. It is that's not a good recipe. Same holds also for of course in cooking, right? If you add salt only after you finish, it doesn't taste the same,
That's a great analogy. You know what? I'm going to be thinking of cybersecurity next time that happens.
Yeah, see, yeah, I mean, like last time you cooked pasta and you forgot about the salt, and there's no way you can, it's too late then, right? So, and maybe it's similar to think about cybersecurity like that. Of course, it's a simplification of how difficult it really is, because producing a smart camera is terribly difficult, and it takes a lot of effort. But to think about cybersecurity from the very start makes it easier. And then now it becomes more concrete. The way to think about cybersecurity is not just for yourself, but also think about the cybersecurity you would want to see from your suppliers, because most companies today don't own 100% of the value add of their products, right? They will buy components, they will buy software that go into that camera. So they also need to talk about cybersecurity with their suppliers. And now we believe with the 17 baseline requirements, this is something that they can make transparent to their suppliers. So the way that Siemens looks at it, for example, now we are integrating these 17 baseline requirements into our contracts and into the things that we are asking from our suppliers, making it very transparent to the suppliers in the first place what we are asking for. And on the flip side, also making it transparent to our customers what we believe we ourselves put into our products and solutions. And that's how the whole ecosystem actually works along the same standard. And I think that is what's needed to ultimately then have a higher cybersecurity in the end product. What's clear, and I don't need to tell you, that there will not be 100% cybersecurity in the end. You still have to look after cybersecurity. So by no means with Charter of Trust are we saying we are 100% secure also. No company that follows even all the principles of the Charter of Trust will be 100% secure. But at least they've tried to do their best. And yeah, with diligence. And I think that's what it is. And that's what we're trying to do. And, and honestly, I would say we also enjoy doing that. So with the Charter of Trust, that for us was positive reconfirmation that somehow we chose to go the right path with making cybersecurity a top management priority, and yes, by also addressing that that's a matter that others should also care about.
Kai, what do you think is the next step for Siemens with regards to Charter of Trust?
No. Well, there's a lot of next steps actually with Charter of Trust. So of course, with that, I would call it success of the first year with us noticing that it does pay off to work together with others. I think we're thrilled to go into the second year. So next steps are that we will look into further principles that we want to work on jointly. So of course, that topic of principle number 2, supply chain, is something that we still have to follow up on. And now the implementation only is starting. And that's, of course, always the more difficult part. No? Talking about something is easy, but implementing it, that's the tricky part. So that's something we're doing. And next to the principle number 2, we're also looking into two further very interesting principles. That's principle number 3, defining security by default. So that's then taking a perspective more to ourselves and to our products and solutions rather than to the outside world, namely the supply chain. So it's more like inwards looking, which will be very interesting. And principle number 6 is all around education. So we are now defining jointly recommendations on what can we do to increase the level of education that we see in cybersecurity, because that's a fact. We are missing capabilities in cybersecurity, and there's just not enough experts on cybersecurity. Plus, what we also see is that the average knowledge on cybersecurity in society isn't high enough to how much we use digital technologies every day. Because I believe that one of the fundamental questions of our century is how technology is actually influencing our lives, and we need to be more educated about this, starting with school children, but also taking care of everybody else who's already in the job market or even after retirement. People need to know how to handle technology and how to deal with challenges that are caused by technology. And one of them is the matter of cybersecurity.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's no different than driving a car. It's integral to our lives today.
Absolutely. And look, we do have certain rule set around driving cars, that's highly regulated, and that has always been the case. But there's also a certain type of ownership that we put on people that are navigating cars, right? So the rules and regulations will not take care of everything that you do while driving a car. You need to have your skill set to be able to navigate a car. You need to prove every once in a while that you have that skill set. And navigating the internet or any digital traffic, there's nothing like that. Not even close to that. So yeah, one could see that maybe parts of society feel left alone also there, right? And maybe we need to find ways how to improve that.
Kai, how do people connect with you?
Well, there's various ways of connecting. One is, of course, on social media. So that's how we connected Avrohom in the first place, right? On Twitter. Of course, that's personal. Also on LinkedIn, you would find, but even more than that, we're trying to be, of course, very open, because we see there's the need for having discussions about technology, having discussions about cybersecurity. So I think speaking for Siemens and speaking for the Charter of Trust, we really want to engage in discussions on the matter of cybersecurity. And all contacts of all partners are on our website, and that's charteroftrust.com. So that's where you'll find all the partners and more information also on the Charter of Trust. Always up to date. That's how to connect, not just to Siemens, but to all of the Charter of Trust partners. And really looking forward to more discussion on that.
That's great. I'm going to post that information to the show notes so that people can click on it and get right to them. Excellent.
That's perfect. Thank you very much.
Kai, do you have any parting words of wisdom that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, since you sent me the question beforehand, I've been thinking about that, to be honest. Probably not parting words of wisdom, but ultimately, now we've talked about cybersecurity, but ultimately I think it's all about trust. That's really the fundamental notion. And of course, it's a much bigger concept than just cybersecurity. So when we started this initiative, we called it Charter of Trust because we wanted to give it a positive spin, right? And trust is something that has been the foundation for not only for business, but for each and every relationship. So a good relationship, hopefully, in most cases, is built on trust. And now that we are building more and more, virtual relationships, we also need to think about trust. And maybe there's new ways of creating that kind of a trust. And that's something that fuels me. And what I always say is trust is the new gold. I think it's very important to think about trust in the way we navigate in the digital sphere and in the way we also come up with digital business models. And I think cybersecurity is a big part of it. It's probably not all, But my call goes out to everybody: make cybersecurity and trust in the digital age something you think about, and maybe you will also, take responsibility. And ultimately, I think it's much more fun if we work together on that one, not individually, not against each other, but let's see how we can collaborate to make that happen.
Kai, thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom. I really enjoyed having you on the show.
Avrohom, thank you very much for giving me that opportunity and for taking the time on your end. I enjoyed it very much, and let's keep in touch. I really enjoy that, and I also enjoy your show. Thank you.